Turning back to our continuing coverage for you of today's highly anticipated meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin. It's happening in Alaska later this afternoon. Face the Nation moderator and chief foreign affairs correspondent, that's Margaret Brennan, is already in Anchorage, and she talked about the summit with Alaska Republican Senator, that's Dan Sullivan.
Vladimir Putin's being brought in from the cold. He's been isolated by the world for a reason. Do you think that this is rewarding bad behavior by giving him this spotlight on the American soil?
Vladimir Putin is coming to negotiate with Trump because of the sanctions. Don't take it from me. Listen to our European allies who are definitive on that. The reason Putin is even doing this is because of the threat of serious secondary sanctions. So I think that that is important.
We're happy to say Margaret joins us now. Margaret, good morning to you. You know, Donald Trump has said very publicly that he's going to know within the first couple of minutes if Vladimir Putin is serious about these conversations. And he said his goal basically is to get to a second conversation. So what do you think needs to happen? What needs to be accomplished to get to that second conversation?
Well, Gayle, we know Vladimir Putin wants to avoid sanctions, and we know President Trump wants at least a ceasefire. So if he can get that ceasefire, which Ukraine has already agreed to, Russia has not, that would be some progress. But really, Vladimir Putin just needs to keep on talking. He may want to stave off those sanctions by showing some kind of interest in a deal with the U.S. And President Trump's goals here have been murky. He's mentioned U.S. interest in business investments, for example. We noticed that the Commerce Secretary is on his plane this morning. His Treasury Secretary is on his plane, along with national security officials. There's also mention of interest in arms control deals. So if Vladimir Putin can dangle something like that of interest to the U.S. and keep talking, he may be able to call this a success. And that's what Ukraine fears, is that something dangled to President Trump by this former KGB agent may stretch this out into diplomacy that ultimately can weaken Ukraine. The hope
Margaret,
is certainly it won't.
Yeah, you've been speaking with European diplomats about this meeting. How are they feeling about it? What are their expectations about this meeting?
Well, you know, Nate, I'd say concerned. The NATO Secretary General told us that he views Russia still as the primary threat to the Western alliance in Europe, full stop. So there's a lot of skepticism that Vladimir Putin, if he is forgiven for seizing 20% of Ukraine's territory by force, that he would stop there. There's concern he could go further. And right now, the U.S. intelligence assessment is that this war has turned in Russia's favor. So if Vladimir Putin buys more time, staves off those sanctions, and gets even a short-term ceasefire, does he just use that to refit and refuel and send his forces back onto the battlefield? Or is this really the start of some kind of peace negotiation? We know, and this is pretty interesting, actually, that the vice president has been very involved in the details here. He's been talking to European diplomats, saying to them that, yes, there does need to be some kind of security guarantee for Ukraine, but that the U.S. doesn't want NATO to be part of it at all, and that, he said, the U.S. won't make territorial concessions. Anything about Ukraine's territory has to be done with Ukraine directly.
It's going to be a very long day, and the world is watching. Margaret, thank you so much. And a reminder that Margaret and John Dickerson, who's going to join us a little bit later on in our program, will lead CBS News coverage of President Trump's meeting with Putin today here on CBS and streaming on CBS News 24/7.